I'm ready whenever you are.
I am ready.
Okay.
So, you have questions about the procedure or whatever?
No, but I will warn you that I did it like earlier in the day yesterday. So
Okay.
it's been like a long time, and I also have been studying all day, so my brain is just full. I can't imagine that I'm gonna remember everything to the best of my ability, but
All right.
next time I do it, I'm gonna do the beeper closer to the interview.
I think that's a general rule. The closer to the interviewer, the better. But
Yeah.
I also think that it'll be fine. That what we have, everything is an approximation, and we're going to learn some stuff. And then, as long as you have enough brain cells left over to learn some stuff, then we're going to be in good shape.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Then I think number one.
All right. Number one, so it was my first one, so I didn't really know what to expect. The beep kind of like caught me off guard, but just to set the scene a little bit, I was watching a TV show. I was watching Survivor, and someone was talking when it was beeping, and I wasn't really thinking. It was kind of like an emotional scene a little bit, so I was more intently focusing on what the person was saying rather than actually like having forming my own thought, if that makes sense.
Okay. So does that mean that you are watching TV and carried along by the show, watching what's happening on the show?
Yeah. So I don't know if it was like more of like a physical thing that I was feeling, but I was definitely like more focused on the show at that point than I was at any other point.
Okay. And if it's a physical thing, it'd be fine with me if it's a physical thing. I don't want to prejudice one way or the other whether it's a physical thing, but if it's a physical thing, I would like to know what the characteristics of that are, to the extent that you can recall. And if you can't remember that, that's fine too.
To be honest, like when the beeper went off, it like snapped me out of whatever was happening. So like I was like, "Oh, I got to turn it off." I wasn't like in the moment
Okay.
immediately after. It kind of like pulled me away. So like the
Okay.
first beep is kind of what wasn't that good of an experience for me.
And that's very common on the first sampling day.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get, it's a skill.
Yeah, I got better as it went on.
Right. So maybe we should leave this beep. We should say what I would say is, it sounds like you're watching TV. You're somehow into the TV, not exactly sure how the beep disturbs you, and
Can I
you.
ask one more thing about this one?
Sure.
Absolutely.
So you at some point you used the word emotional, and I didn't know if you meant that was a characteristic of you, Ryan, your experience, or like the scene, the storyline at that moment's emotional.
It was an emotional storyline, so like I was more like in tune with what was like I was watching it more intently because I didn't know what was going to happen, something
Okay.
like that. Because leading up to that, I was like, it was new to me. I was very aware that the beeper was in my ear, so
Mm-hmm.
I was like focusing on that for the entirety of watching the show. Like I was having to like force myself to like watch the show, and I,
Mm-hmm.
I kept trying to like every time I had an organic thought, I would think about how I would explain that verbally. So like it was just a constant cycle of like having a good thought and then me trying to like think about how I would verbalize that.
I think that I think that's pretty common. I certainly
Yeah.
have. I can relate to you on that. And so, am I understanding right though that the beeper had been very present to you? It's like I got this thing in my ear. What if it beeps? What if it beeps? Whatever. But at
Yeah.
this moment, that has apparently disappeared. Like I'm really into the
That's why I
show.
was surprised because the show was captivating at that point.
Okay,
Um
got it.
yeah. I didn't have like any like noticeable thoughts going on. Like I wasn't like observing like a clothing or what how they were saying things. I was just listening and absorbing.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
So I don't know that I ever told you, Ryan, but we're going to alternate back and forth. So I did the first beep. Alec will do beep number two, and obviously she'll jump in when she wants to ask something, and I will too.
That's totally fine. Whatever works for you guys.
Number
Cool.
two.
Beep number two.
Okay, beep number two. I so between the beeps, I would like do a little video recording and I would put it onto my computer. So I was doing like a little bit of editing at that time, and I was listening to what I was saying, and I said something along the lines of, if I had juicier thoughts, the video would be better, or something like that. Or I wish this was a juicy thought, but it wasn't. It was that first one where it was like kind of boring. So what did I write down? I said, it wasn't like a verbal thought, but I just knew at that moment, like when I was listening to what I was saying, that if I had like a dark thought or something that was like crazy, the video would be more entertaining to people. Like it wasn't like verbal or anything. It was just like I knew that I felt that, I guess. Like I didn't have to like verbalize it with internal monologue at all. I just knew it.
Okay. Let me see if I get the like setting here.
Yeah.
So you have been beeped for beep number 1,
Mm-hmm.
and then you made like a recording of yourself about beep number 1?
Yeah, so I wrote down my thoughts on it, like when it beeped, and then I did a recording of what happened and what I was thinking to make the video.
And
then,
you are then playing that back.
Yeah, I was sitting at my computer and I put it like into the editing program, and it was playing along, and then it beeped when I said like the line, I wish this thought was juicy or something. Some horrible adjective.
Yeah, I kind of like this juicy adjective. So is that something, this is where I'm unclear, is the juicy thing, is that something you said in the video you made?
I said it in the video. So I was listening to that being said when it beeped, but I was also feeling like I knew that if, like, I was thinking that if I had like a crazy thought, the video would be better. But like I didn't like verbalize it in my brain.
Okay. So I'm sorry for the abundant clarification. So I'm listening to myself say something about I wish I'd had a juicy thought, and at the same time I have some idea or sense or feeling that if I'd had a juicy thought or a crazy thought or a dark thought, that would have been cooler.
Yeah, it would more people would enjoy the video, but like it wasn't verbal. I don't know how to explain it. It just like popped up.
And by not verbal, am I understanding right? You mean there are not explicit words?
I know no words to it. Like there in a beep in the future, there is words to one of my thoughts, but not here. It just I was listening and I just felt like the video would be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so there's no explicit words, but it sounds like the notion is quite clear. Like if I had a juicier thought, this would be a cooler video.
Very clear without an internal monologue.
Okay. And you've called it a feeling or an idea or something. Is this in the like cognitive realm?
It's difficult to explain a thought for me personally if it's not visual or verbal. So like I don't know how, like what language to use to explain this. It just popped up and like I didn't have to say it. I just knew it.
Yeah. But it feels right to call it a thought?
I would call it a thought because it's something that it was an opinion that I had, but it wasn't verbalized.
There's no picture, there are no words, but I know I'm thinking if I'd had a juicier thought, this would be a cooler video.
Yeah, like it was just like a snap second that I could translate that into words if I had to, but it's one of those thoughts where like if you look at a water bottle, you don't like say in your head water bottle, it's just there. You just know it's a water bottle.
Okay.
This one's probably the hardest one to explain.
Okay. Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job explaining it, so that's good. I think I've got it. Well, I guess I should ask about the video. So you're also in parallel watching the video. Is that registering? Like, are you paying attention to that, or have you sort of forgotten that and you're into your own thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not like zoning out. I was paying attention and like listening to what I was saying and where I was going to cut the video and stuff like that. So like I was paying attention to what I was saying, but I was also like, the way that I said something, I knew it like triggered the fact that it would have been better if it was a different thought.
Okay.
And as far as your experience is concerned, would you say you're more into this thinking that if it had been better, it would have been more interesting, or more into the cutting, editing task?
I was more into the editing part of it. But that kind of like goes hand in hand with the editing, because like when you're making something creative or artistically, like inspiration just like pops up like that. It's not like, I don't know how to explain that.
So I'm agreeing with that, with all that, but what I'm trying to do is to figure out when you, so is your attention, whatever you want to call that, your mental powers, whatever, are they, as far as your experience is concerned, are you more into the editing task or more into the thinking about the editing task, which is be more, if I had a juicier thought, it'd be more interesting or whatever. Or maybe that question doesn't make sense. And
I think maybe I could answer this question. I think I was into the editing part, focusing just on that. Just like when I was watching the TV show, I was just listening to what the person was saying. Nothing else was going on. But then when I said that one phrase, then it like took me out of it. And I thought of the fact that it would be better without words.
And so at that moment, have you left the editing task behind? And so at that particular moment, for whatever reason, I'm into this thought process?
I could have just kept editing and kept moving on. It wasn't like it was a distraction to what I was doing.
Right. So skilled tasks like your editing task, like driving a car or something like that, you can do that with either paying attention or not paying attention. Obviously, you're paying when you're driving, for example, you're paying attention. You're not hitting other cars or whatever, and you're navigating with it or not. But you could be in a conversation with your friend, and at the moment, totally absorbed in the conversation, and the driving is happening.
I've driven home without even like remembering that I was driving, just because I was deep in thought.
So the question is about the editing task. Is the editing task mostly like that? At this particular moment, I'm totally into this. If it had been a better thought.
I was fixed on the editing. Like I was focused specifically on the editing. I wasn't really thinking about anything else until I said that one thing, and then I had that feeling that I wish this was a better thought, and then it beeped.
Okay. Then I'm good.
Yeah, me too.
Number three.
So I was done with the editing part, so I went back to watch Survivor, and the characters had to use flint to make a fire, and like you chop it with an axe and it makes sparks and stuff. So I was watching them do that, and I was watching it with my friend, and I was in the middle of talking when the beep went off, and I was saying, here I wrote down the exact quote. I was explaining to my friend that if you scrape off too much magnesium from the flint, it doesn't work. So I was in the middle of saying that, and the thought that led to that was just like the same exact thing when I was editing. It wasn't verbal. It was like just like my body knew that I should say this out loud, and I just said it to him. I didn't even think about what I was gonna say. I just knew that I was just gonna say it. So like, you know how like people say think before you speak, where you use internal monologue to maybe like put the words in order of what you're gonna say. I didn't do that. It just popped in my head and then I said it.
So I'm not sure I'm following this. So sometimes we use a timeline that looks sort of like we use our paper as a timeline where this is time marching on, and the beep hits right here. Yeah. And the beep occurs, and it's beeping, and you push the button and you stop the beep, and then time keeps on marching along like that. Mm-hmm. So the moment that we're interested in is this moment here, 1 millisecond just before the beginning of the beep. And is it the case at that particular moment that you are saying something aloud to your friend?
I was in the middle, like I started talking, and then in the middle of my sentence, it beeped.
Okay. And the sentence is, if you scrape off too much magnesium, it doesn't work.
Yeah, the flint won't work anymore.
And sometimes when people are saying something out loud, those words are just rolling out of their mouth and they're not paying any attention to them. And sometimes they seem like they're sort of engaged in the speaking. Are you engaged in the speaking at this time?
Absolutely not. I just it was verbal diarrhea, just spewed out as I was watching what was happening on the TV.
And so does that mean that as far as your experience is concerned, you're sort of like encountering these words in the same way as your friend is encountering those words? They're
Exactly.
obviously.
Same as I'm saying it. Whatever I'm saying, my friend is hearing it for the first time, and I'm hearing it for the first time too. Like I didn't plan out what I was going to say.
Okay, so these words are just sort of coming out without any direction of yours, experience
Yeah.
direction. And is your experience of speaking these words or of hearing these words? And the way what we sometimes differentiate that is imagine yourself talking into a tape recorder. I could say these things into the tape recorder, and then I could play it back and hear them coming out of the tape recorder. Same words, same voice, same inflection, same whatever, except that one experience is of speaking and the other is of hearing.
So what do you mean? Like when am I experiencing this? As I'm talking or before I'm talking?
At this moment, that we're interested in, which is we've decided as you're talking, do you experience yourself as talking, or do you experience yourself as hearing yourself talk? Or maybe that question doesn't make sense for you.
Yeah, I can't like wrap my head around that. I was just talking and I was hearing my voice come out of my mouth, if that answers your question. Can I have an example of someone else answering this question? So like
Sure. So some people would say, when I speak, I feel like I'm the creator of these words and I'm the driver of the experience, and that's what I mean when I say I'm talking. And other people would say, I don't actually experience myself as talking. I just hear myself. The experience is the experience of my talking is exactly the same as my experience of Ryan talking. I'm hearing words coming at me. I'm creating them in this situation, but the words seem like more an auditory phenomenon than a speaking phenomenon. And I'm not a fan of either one of those. I don't really care. I'm just asking whether you have that experience. But other people would say, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't make a distinction.
I think I know what you're saying. I just have never thought about it that way before.
Okay.
I guess it's more of me hearing my voice.
Well, what I would say is let's leave that question aside and not try to answer it, and use this as what we've done here is we've raised the possibility that we hadn't thought about before.
High fidelity.
Of fidelity, that's right. And somewhere down the road, maybe this conversation will help us out, and you'll have another experience. You say, "Oh, I can now I know what he was talking about."
Yeah. Okay.
And so we've established that you're talking. Are you still paying attention to the show, or at this particular moment have you left the show in favor of saying this to your friend?
I'm still watching a show. It's kind of like brushing your teeth while like looking in the mirror and looking at yourself. Like you still see yourself, but like you're not really thinking about brushing your teeth. You're just doing it. It's like muscle memory kind of. So like talking is muscle memory. Like I don't need to like plan out what I'm going to say to talk. I could do it on the fly.
So as far as your experience is concerned, what's before the footlights of your consciousness, is your experience entirely of watching the show? And as a fact of the universe, I'm saying if you scrape off too much magnesium, then the flute won't work. That's a fact. I'm saying that, but I don't even experience that at all. I'm just watching the show.
Oh no, I said it. I knew I was talking, and I knew I wanted to say it to my friend to tell him. I wanted to teach him about what was going on the TV.
Got it.
So I guess that's the motive behind me talking.
So it is not the case that the words are totally automatic, and it's also not the case that I have left the show in favor of the words. Mm-hmm. But at this particular moment, my experience is both of telling my friend about Flint and watching the show.
Yeah, so like if my friend wasn't there, I would have had the same thought about scraping too much magnesium off. I would have like, not verbally, I would have, once again, it would have just like popped up like a feeling, and then I would have just kept going on it and watching it. But since he was there, I'm like, oh, I hate explaining things with words because it's not what's happening in my head, but I knew that I wanted to teach him this. It wasn't a thought where I was just like, maybe he would like this. And then I said it. I was like, I felt.
In a teaching mode, I said this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to be really careful to not assume that the motive or the intention always has to be present, right? Like we could say there's always some intention or whatever, but it's not always present in our direct experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this moment, is the teachingness of it part of your direct experience? Or is that just sort of the context? Like, I guess I want to say this because I want to teach him, but it's not like I feel an urge to teach him, or...
I could have saved my breath or not. I felt the need to engage with my friend that was sitting next to me. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't thinking about having to engage with him. That's what humans do. They engage with each other.
It just came out.
It just came out.
Okay.
Like,
I think I'm good.
Have you ever like stubbed your toe and like swore and it just like the words just came out? Like you didn't like think about swearing, but it just like popped out.
Yeah.
Similar to that.
Probably today I have. Well, then I'm good for that one.
All right.
All right.
Good.
How am I doing so far?
Good. You're doing great.
Fantastic.
All right.
This is exactly the kind of conversations that we typically do on the first day, where we're trying to raise some issues that you probably haven't thought about, people haven't thought about before, and we don't really know what's important to be asking about. When you say something that triggers, well, maybe he meant this and maybe he meant that, then we're going to ask about it, and some of those things will turn out to be useful on the next day or the next day, and some of them will turn out to have been a waste of time, and there's no way of knowing, so we're just muddling along, I guess, but that's the way this process has to be, I think, if we're really aiming at fidelity. So I think you're doing great. I think Alex doing great. I'm doing okay too. So I think
you're doing okay.
Yes.
All right, number 4.
All right. Still watching the show. This beep like came almost like 10 minutes like right after. And a woman, I had to like look up her ethnicity so I didn't like sound ignorant. She's from Sri Lanka, and she has an accent, and I was focusing on her accent, not in like a negative or positive way, just like how she was saying specific words, and I wasn't thinking to myself in like an analyzing way. I was just noting every time she said something, I would note it. But I was also listening to the context of the words she was saying, not just like the inflection on the words, to the point where like when she was done talking, I said, that was a good answer out loud to my friend again. And then it beeped. Okay.
So I want to nail down where exactly the beep happens. Like, because that sounded like maybe if some digressions of like, here's what I've been doing the rest of the show. So what exactly is all present at the moment of the beep? I understand there's like a focus on the accent.
Yeah. There's a focus on the accent, and she was explaining her case why she should win the show. And I was listening to what she was saying, but also focusing on the accent just because it was unique to me. I was trying to like figure out where she was from maybe, but I wasn't like verbalizing these thoughts.
So she is speaking at the moment of the beep.
She's speaking. She just finished speaking, and I just say, that was a good answer. I said it out loud, and then it beeps like a half a second after I said that.
Okay. So she has just finished speaking.
Just finished speaking.
And I have commented that is a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the beep interrupts?
Yep.
Okay. And so is her accent still present to you? Or was it like I was focused on the accent before, and now I've moved on to saying that was a good answer and then beep? So or is the accent still somehow there?
I was still like sensing the accent the whole time. Like, you know how, have you ever talked to someone for a while if they have an accent and then eventually it's just like it becomes second nature, you don't even think about it anymore? It was kind of new to me, so I was like noted. I was aware.
Mm-hmm. And even though technically her voice is no longer, I'm still somehow aware of or sensing or something her accent.
No, not at that point. It was only when she was speaking that I was thinking about the accent. And by
Okay,
thinking,
good.
I mean note it, like just noticing it.
So let me see whether I've got this in our timeline deal. So I'm watching the show. She's talking. I'm listening to her accent. I'm also tracking what she's saying. I'm interested in her accent. I'm tracking what she's saying. I'm interested in her accent. I'm tracking what she's saying. And then I say to my friend, that was a good answer, and beep happens in the middle. So our interest is what's happening right here, not so much what's out here. So it sounds in this rendition that the accent portion of it is here and gone and not present here.
I don't think I could give you any like information that I remember from between the time I said the words and stopped speaking till it beeped. I don't know anything that happened at that point. Like it was such a small little point in time that I wasn't even focusing on anything. I don't even remember what was happening at that point.
So the point that Alec was trying to raise was that in the physical world, her speaking and her accent have come and gone apparently, but in the experiential world, the experiential world doesn't necessarily track the physical world. So her accent could have come and gone in the physical world, but for some reason, you are still interested in her accent.
I was not still interested in the accent.
Okay, then the accent is a done deal. And what's happening is I'm saying to my friend, that was a good answer.
That was a good answer. And then I was feeling that she was doing a good job of explaining herself. That's in that moment. That's what I was feeling.
Okay.
And when I say physical is a weird word because it's not like physical sensation that I'm feeling. I don't want, like you were explaining about how some people feel heat or something. It wasn't like that at all. It was just like a more like a gut feeling. That still sounds physical, but.
But there is something coming to me, present to me about like my evaluation of her.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking about a whole bunch of different things at once, like how the game works, what you have to say to the people that they're talking to, who's listening. It's just like a whole combination of things that are happening. Like I'm not just like brain dead focusing on one thing at once. It's just like a whole encapsulation of the entire show where everything just adds up, and I'm like, that was a good answer, just based on how everything works in the show.
Yeah. But I'm gathering it's not like I have a direct thought about, well, here are the rules of the game, and then here's what the other guy said, but it's sort of like I am skillfully grokking all of it, and then when she's done speaking, I realize, oh, that was a good answer.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not like I was like mentally adding up all the criteria you need to hit to have a good answer. I just knew it was a good answer based on my experience of watching the show and how it works.
And so then my question is sort of, well, does he just somehow in some, background, unconscious, whatever way, does he take all that in and what comes out is that was a good answer? Or is there some directly present to me thought or feeling or knowing that it was a good answer, and then also I say that? Probably
the first one.
Okay. So like behind the scenes, I'm taking it all in and I say it.
Yeah. So it's more so me explaining to my friend that it was a good answer without actually having to like put all the pieces together. And the words that came out, once again, I didn't think about speaking. It just popped out. I guess that answers your question about like a tape recorder. If I just hit play and it came out.
Right. You don't experience yourself as driving the words. They're coming out.
They just flow out.
And so in that sense, is this beep really quite similar to the one before, where there's there's obviously some understanding. Like you said, I'm not brain dead. I'm taking in the show, but then I just words just sort of come out. They make sense, whatever. But my experience is just words coming out of me.
Yeah, it was same exact, I guess, method of my thought.
Okay. And the show, is that still getting in, or have you sort of left that?
No, I was able to like focus on the show still at the same time.
Okay. So I'm still paying attention to the show, and I say to my friend, yeah, go ahead.
She's done talking, so I probably am pulled away from the show a little bit. Because like when they're talking, I'm more engaged, but then like they stop talking, and then I say that was a good answer. So I guess I am pulled away from the show at that point when I say it.
Okay. And I have understood that this is kind of like the happening of speaking. Like words are coming out, but I don't experience myself producing them. I don't have some presentiment or thought of what they are. I just say what I know.
It's kind of like reaching into a bag and pulling out a sentence. Yeah. Like it pops up, and then I just know how words go together, and they came out as a group of words that mean something.
Okay.
Excuse me. So I want to make one more distinction about this before we move on, and that is that a minute ago you said, well, she was done speaking, and so I probably had withdrawn from the show a little bit. what I want us to be really clear about, which is a skill and it's going to take some practice, is the distinction between inferring something. Well, she's done talking, and therefore I must have been doing this. That's an inference. And a direct apprehension of experience, which would have been something like, well, I felt myself at the moment pulled away from the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so you asked yesterday, I think, or whenever the last time we talked about, well, don't sometimes people fill in the details? Well, this might be, when people say something like, well, probably it was this, that might be the filling in of the details. And I want us to be sensitive to try not to do that.
And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that that's a strong possibility that is happening right now, just because it was so long ago. I prefaced it in the beginning.
Yep. And that's fine. I'm not being the slightest bit critical. I'm happy that we're having the conversation. I'm aware that you're understanding what the deal is here, which is what the first day is about. So I just want to be explicit that we don't want to do that, and that I'm a careful listener. We're careful listeners here, and we're gonna try to help us not fall into that theoretical explanatory mode.
Do you guys have certain like terms for the different methods of like the questions that you're asking, like that you're trying to like find out? So like the way you're phrasing questions, are you trying to look for certain types of things? Like, for example, like if in the medical world, if I go to ask someone a question, it's like directed down a path to lead me to an answer that I'm looking for. Is that what you're doing? Do you have terms for like speaking without thinking?
Yes, we do.
And what's that called?
Well, speaking without thinking, words rolling out, I guess, is our technical term for that. But we're actually, I think we don't do what you just described. We have terms that we use, but we recognize that people are maybe very different from each other, and so we explicitly do not want to teach you to use the terms that we are interested in. We want to enter into your experience, which means probably we have to translate, we have to understand what you are saying on your terms. And then when we're done, probably everybody will agree as to what it was they were saying. And then we can say, well, this was an example of that, or it wasn't. But it's not, for us, it's not a matter of trying to fit Ryan into predefined categories.
I was just trying to see if it would be easier to just have like a definition of some of the things that I'm saying, just so like when we do this again, I can say it was this, so I don't have to like verbally try to look like an idiot trying to figure out how my brain works.
Yeah, we want you to look like an idiot. That's our goal here.
That's the goal.
And we also want ourselves to look like idiots, because that's the only way that you can get to fidelity. So I think what we'll end up doing is we'll end up saying something like, well, this is sort of like back in sample number 2.1. You remember that? And then and after we've said that 2 or 3 times, then we'll say, well, we probably ought to have a name for that. If we're going to be referring back to the same thing, let's give that a name. And it might be a name that you use, and it might be a name that we use. By that time, we'll be able to negotiate that without worrying about whether we have screwed you up too badly by imposing our vocabulary on you.
Okay, so it's more like labeling. You're defining how I'm explaining things more so.
Eventually, we will try to describe what you have described, and when we do that, we think that you will say, that's exactly what I had in mind, and it won't be that we have divided the world up into 5 or 8 or 29 or whatever different things, and Ryan fits a 3 and a 7 and a 21 or whatever. It's going to be that we will have described the essential features of what samples we have seen, and you will agree that, yep, that's what I said, and or not. Maybe we won't be able to do it, but chances are good that you will agree. And then we can say, well, that is the kind of thing that we call, and with other participants, X, or not. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, sounds good.
And even if we do say it's X, it might very well be that we will say, well, this is sort of like what we would call X with other people, but Ryan has his own particular flavor about this, and instead of being right down the middle of an X, it's a X with a little bit of something else in it.
I do have a feeling my brain is going to be a little bit more unique than other people you talk to.
Well, that's what makes life interesting.
Shall see.
Okay.
Number 5.
I think this one is a fun one. Yeah. I was watching a Domino's commercial, and it was like a bunch of boxes, like a Zoom call, just like a bunch of people on like a whatever it is, FaceTiming, whatever. And there's like this overweight kid, and he was eating pizza, and he said something about how much he loves pizza. And I said in internal monologue in my head, his parents should probably stop buying him pizza. It's not something I would say out loud, but it is something that popped into my head.
And this is caught in flight by the moment of the beep, is that right?
Yeah.
And those words were his parents should probably stop buying him pizza?
Yep.
And this, I understand, is spoken in your voice?
My voice, yep.
And with any particular inflection?
However, I just said it out loud. Same exact way inside of my head.
So that's, to my ear, that sounded like sort of a matter of fact, straight ahead declarative sentence. His parents should probably stop buying him pizza, without any particular inflection, like his parents should stop buying him pizza.
It was more like his parents should probably stop buying him pizza, just like.
Okay. And that is, so we talked a little bit ago about the distinction between speaking and hearing. Does it seem like you're speaking those words, or do you?
I'm driving that for sure.
Okay. So this is the experience of speaking those words, not of hearing those words played back to me.
It's something I would have said out loud to my friends if they were there, but no one was there, so I just said it in my head to myself.
Okay. And my eyes are still aimed at the TV.
Mm-hmm.
And am I seeing that, or have I withdrawn from that in favor of saying this?
I'm doing both at the same time.
Okay. And both in your experience at the same time. So I continue to experience the TV commercial while I say this to myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to explain something just like for the future, because it might happen again.
Okay.
The way I said that, like I can initiate self speech, like internal monologue, as what I wrote about. But sometimes it's like louder and more prominent, like I'm forcing myself to do it. And then other times it's like, I don't want to say quieter, but a little less it doesn't pull me out of certain situations. It's just kind of like going on underneath the scene. This was like very prominent where like I wanted to say it. Like I was gonna say it out loud, but no one was there. So I just said it to myself.
So regardless of whether this was similar to or different from other ones, you would say, this is a question, that this, I was speaking in a prominent way. So, so is the prominence a characteristic of this speaking, or is that just, there's going to be some other ones where it's less prominent?
This is like, I guess, not like the norm, but if I wanted to initiate self talk to myself, like the example of me looking in the mirror and saying a sentence, if I wanted to do that, it would be at this intensity or like volume. It's so hard to explain this.
So
But other
that,
times I could be in class paying attention and I'll like kind of daydream, and then the things that I say are a little less of me driving and more of it coming out organically without me doing it. This
so,
is, I knew I wanted to say this, I initiated it myself. Whereas sometimes I don't initiate it, but it's still my voice that I hear just a little bit less, I guess, forced.
got it. So, so you say it's difficult for you to describe, and I would say it's difficult for me to understand. And the good news of this is that we neither of us have to do it well on the first sampling day. Because if this is really a characteristic, as you say it is, we're going to get more examples of that on the day 2 or day 3 or whatever. And at those times, you're going to be able to say, well, this one is not like that other one because that other one was prominent or whatever. And we're going to be able to figure this out. And and that's a essential feature of the method. We don't have to work too hard on any particular day. And in a fundamentally important way, no sample is really all that important. So what you have done is you've awakened in me. Well, I'm going to be interested in what he's talking about. But sometimes things are prominent and sometimes not. I don't know what the hell he's talking about now. But I've got the idea that maybe that's going to be an interesting thing. I've filed that away somehow in my bones, my neurons, and I'm going to be sensitive to that down the road, and we're going to figure it out, or we're going to forget that we ever had this conversation, and because it hasn't really happened.
All right. Let me just like for future reference, that experience right there where I initiated the self-speak, and as I said, it was prominent going, such a weird word. That is the exact experience that I was fascinated with. That's what initiated me writing everything and making the videos, was that experience. And the flip side of that, people saying that they can't do that. That's the whole thing that I'm interested in, and what I wrote about.
Okay, well, good. And so I think we're gonna find out some interesting things about that. And it's not we're gonna find out things that I already know and I'm gonna tell you about. And it's probably also not things that you already know and you're gonna tell us about. It's going to be, we're going to be able to figure this out because we're going to get some examples, and it's going to clarify for you what you meant. And when you clarify that for yourself, you're going to be able to clarify that for us. And so the method really is, I think, it's an emergent thing that requires all of us working it together.
Okay.
Cool.
Any other questions about that one, or?
I'd say we ought to go on to beat number 6.
Same.
Okay. Okay, this one was also a more interesting one to me. So I was in the middle of playing a video game, so I was focusing on that, but it was almost like autopilot when the beep went off. So like I was still able to play the game, but I wasn't exactly as focused on it as I could be. Just like like when you drive home and it's just like, you're driving, but you're thinking about other things, just like that.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about was I just sent a text message, maybe like 30 seconds to a minute prior to the beep. And I visually saw one of the words that I said. So I said, I was gonna text ya, but instead of saying you, I typed out ya, like Y-A, and like I was visually seeing the Y-A, but I was also saying the sentence in like out loud, not out loud, in my head.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So does it seem like there are sort of three things going on here?
Mm-hmm.
The game saying I'm gonna text you and seeing the ya?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of like I could just see the word yeah, and all the other words are just kind of like blurry out of picture. So it's just the yeah. For some reason, that word stood out to me, and I think I was saying it almost like trying to figure out how the person that I sent it to would interpret it.
Okay.
So I think I was just saying it like, how would they read it? Maybe that's how I analyzed that, because it was one of those daydreams where it just kind of popped in and I wasn't controlling. I didn't initiate that speech.
Okay. And of the game, the speaking and the image, is one of those more prominent than the others?
All in their own way. So like the game was external. So like my body, I mean, that's what I was doing. So like that's what it was, just there. I was still like, I could see what I was doing. I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then the visual and the words were happening at the same time. They were like connected. They were together, but different.
Okay. Well, and sometimes people can say, like in terms of like your mental energy, kind of your mental powers, like we said before, some people will say, well, yes, those things are all going on simultaneously, but it's the image that kind of dominates. It's like 70% of that experience at the moment. Or sometimes people say, oh, they're all kind of equally present. They're all there.
I think it was equally present. I could see how something could be more dominant just based on my own personal experience. But at that time, they all seemed to just like have their own place in my head.
Okay. So about the words. So I understand I'm speaking this in my head. The I'm gonna text you or whatever.
Yeah, can you repeat that question?
Are these words are the words I'm gonna text you?
Yeah, I was saying it like it was inner speech.
Okay. And in the same way as in the previous beep, your voice?
No. It's the same voice, but it's a little bit less of the main, like you said, like the 70-30%. This was 33% when the last one was 80%.
Okay.
So it's like that's why I say like it's quieter. It's hard using audio terms because it's not actually present. Like it's not actual sound, but like it's quieter. I wasn't controlling it, where the other one I initiated that speech.
Okay. So in this beep number 6, I am not the initiator of the speech. For whatever reason, I'm saying to myself, I'm gonna text you.
Yeah, I think maybe the YA, like the visual, popped into my head, and then I said it from seeing that.
Okay. So I'm not really the initiator. I don't have this sense or whatever of myself initiating the words. Can you make the distinction between, well, I'm speaking them innerly, I'm innerly speaking them, or I am innerly hearing them? Does that distinction make sense?
I think I was innerly hearing it. Yes.
So in that way, that would make this experience kind of fundamentally different than beep 5. There I was the speaker, the driver, I initiated it, same voice and everything, but here I'm hearing it, like I'm the recipient.
Yeah, the distinction is weird because it's like a similar thing that's happening. So like the experience is similar, but like what initiated it is different. So the beat 5, I just like when I said things out loud, it popped in. I felt the need to say it, so I initiated it. This one, it just kind of like crept in, and I heard it.
Okay.
Yeah, I this one I was not in control of. It just came in.
And how does that compare to I guess the fourth beep? That was a good answer.
That was a good answer, and then the initiated internal monologue for beep 5 were similar. Just one I said in my head, and the other one I said out loud. This one was more of an organic thought where I didn't put any brain power towards it. I didn't try to do this. It just popped up, and I heard it.
Okay.
That's gonna make me sound like I have schizophrenia. Oh my God.
No, you're in a very common company there.
Okay.
Lots of people have that experience.
Jeez.
So the one thing that I would say about all this is I want us not to take the answers that were given to these questions too seriously. We're trying to do the best we can to answer these questions, but we weren't really ready to hear those questions, and we weren't ready to ask the questions. You weren't ready to understand what we were doing about it. So we want to make sure that we understand that there's no urge for us to be consistent. So next time when we do this, just because you said, well, we made a distinction here between prominence and not prominence, or between hearing and speaking, maybe those things, that was because Ryan was tired, or Russ was whatever, and or maybe those things will be building blocks on which we can do better with.
Let me just say quick that those two experiences are very common and happen to me all the time. So whether me initiating the speech or it comes in, it's still speech that is going on often. Where like the first two beeps, they weren't speech related. It was just like I wasn't thinking or initiating or anything. It was more of a feeling. Where these, like the last three, were more of like language based thoughts.
And what I would say is I accept that that's your characterization, and it's probably true. But more than that, I want us to what we call bracket that. So it might very well be true, but let's not act as if it were true, and let's not act as if it were false either. Let's just set that aside. If it is true, we're going to see a lot of them, and then we'll get a chance to make the discriminations that are necessary as we go on the basis of this concrete sample and that concrete sample and this other concrete sample. The alternative is to say, well, I've got this theoretical view of myself, and I'm going to try to fit all these samples, all these experiences into that theoretical view. Let's not do that. Let's set aside any theoretical view that we have, and at the end, and the advantage of doing that is that at the end of our time together, you will have probably a clearer example of what that, or clearer understanding of what that self-theoretical thing is, and which might range from, well, I was entirely wrong, or to well, I was 95% right and I learned that last 5%. That's what bracketing means. We're not believing you. We're not believing you. We're going to set it aside, and we're going to come back to it sometime down the road.
All right. I also think it's important to note, just for like my personal research on this as we're doing this, that this, just like the setting that I was in while I was doing the experiment. So I was studying for 20 hours straight, and then I took a test that morning, and then I was also taking Adderall as well. So I don't know if that affects everything, but I would be interested in trying to do it in different settings or different times of the day to see how, what different type of experiences I have.
We're all for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys put that into your research, like medication or sleep, or I don't know how you account for that.
That's a really good question. And what I would say is we don't spend much time trying to account for it, and and not because it's not important, but because we see our task as being, we're going to try to describe what phenomena we encounter, and we're not going to try to explain it as to why we encountered that, whether it's that or whether it's the tired or the watching TV or whatever. And the reason for that is that there are 999,998 psychologists out there who are trying to explain things, and then there's us who are trying to describe phenomena.
Yes.
And-
So some people are trying to explain why, and then you're just trying to describe.
We're trying to describe things, and then other people can come along and describe and explain why. We're trying to get the phenomena right, without really regard to whether it's drug related or TV related or fatigue related.
We do, I would say though, I mean, we do studies that are more systematic, where it's like our lab has done one in the past where we observed inner experience after someone started an antidepressant.
Yeah.
So those are really interesting questions, and there is certainly reason to suspect that something like medication might fundamentally change your inner experience.
I'm really interested in maybe exploring that for my viewers eventually, once we get the hang of this and we both are on the same page of what I'm trying to explain.
And we'd be all over that. We would think that would be a very interesting thing.
I think that would be entertaining.
But that makes the case that what we need to do is we need to get the phenomena right.
Yeah,
So we've got to set aside whatever theory you have about what Adderall does or doesn't do. If we're going to learn about what Adderall actually does, we got to set that theory aside until we get a chance to see the phenomena. Then we can come back to that theory and say, well, what I thought was true all the way along, or not, or whatever.
Using something that I explained earlier, just in reference to the Adderall, is that thought 5, where like the words initiated themselves, they kind of just crept in. When I take Adderall, it's much less of that, and almost like that's kind of like daydreaming, where like it pulls me out of the situation, where when I initiate self-speech, it doesn't pull me out of the external.
Well, I accept that as probably true, and I would bracket that aside as well, because that's
just note it, and then if I keep talking about it.
And it may very well be an interesting thing for us to do down the road, to manipulate that, let you take it sometimes and not take it some other times, and see whether we can have evidence that shows that as being right or not.
I would like to do that.
My clock says that we've been at this for 58 minutes. We probably ought to say this is good for now, and figure out when we're gonna do it again. And I would answer your question again. What you've done is great, perfect. This is exactly what it is that we probably had in mind for this this deal. And I suspect that you've heard questions that you didn't expect to hear, and comments that you didn't expect to get. And we're trying to figure out how to ask the questions that allow you to describe your experience, and you're trying to figure out how to describe your experience. And maybe next time we'll have learned something from today.
Yeah, I thought it was good. As for when we should do it next, I'm gonna have to look at my schedule, so I'll send you an email about that.